Hi, I'm Diane Dressback, and I have Melissa Farley with me today. And we have the pleasure of interviewing two longtime friends and colleagues, I guess I would have to say. And that is Marsia Gunter. Wave, Marcia, so we know which one you are. There we go, Marsia Gunter and Karen Carnahan. Karen, thank you guys for joining with us today. And Marcia and Karen wrote a chapter in the book From Us for You, Inspiring Stories of Healing, Growth, and Transformation. And when I invited them to do this, they decided they wanted to write the chapter together. So we have two stories for the price of one in the book. So, and I know Marcia and Karen from their company. They came in and were executive leadership coaches for the company I worked for at the time, a credit union. And we spent, gosh, 5 years. I mean, you guys came in quite a bit over 5 or 6 years to do coaching, not only for the executive team, but also for our employees. And I also spent quite a bit of time keeping the message going in between time. So a lot of interaction with you both, and it was very, very positive. So anyway, so Marcia, why don't you start and give us just a brief introduction of, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Marsia Gunter. I am originate from Pocatello, Idaho. I came into the world with a family full of businesses, and I migrated to Portland, Oregon sometime. I can't remember exactly when. It's been a long time. I had unfortunately gotten ill when I came to Portland and was in the critical care unit, and I needed some help after I got out. And I happened to run into someone who knew about women in communication, and I went to a presentation that Karen gave, and I was like, okay, that person's going to be the one that helps me, because it took me about a year to recuperate, so I wasn't working full time. And so she came on board as an outside consultant, and that's how we met.
Okay.
And then we've been working together ever since, 40 years plus.
That's wonderful. Karen, little introduction about yourself.
I marked the number of years that we've been in business because my nephew was born the same time we started being in business together, and he is now 41. And that's my way of referencing how long this business has been around. And on some days it feels like it was just yesterday. And then there are some days when I see people like Diane that I remember it was a long time ago. And it's been remarkable journey ever since. My quick background is I'm a preacher's kid, lived in a lot of different places, did a lot of different things, grew up in the front row of the church. And my deep connection to that world helps me be with people in all the different ways in which they are.
What I would love to hear is share some information about your chapter. We don't want to give all the details away. We want people to still have some surprises in there. But if you could talk a little bit about your chapter and why you decided to write this chapter together.
Being in business together for 41 years, it would seem odd not to do it together. We are a business partnership that has outlived any of the prognostications that we had when we started. Women-owned businesses were only supposed to last about 5 or 7 years before they would go defunct. And it just seemed appropriate that we would do it together. We have a together story. The work that we've developed and worked with clients with has been because the dynamism between the two of us, because we come with such different ways of thinking, actually makes the work be better. So just occurred to me that it would be the best way to do it.
And so is that what the chapter is about? Is it about being business partners and what that process has been like and the evolution of your business? Or what exactly are we getting a taste of from you?
The chapter is about, when Diane talked to us, she said she wanted it to be inspiring. And so Karen comes from a very different background than I do. She's a preacher's kid. She traveled many places before she was in the 9th grade. I was a kid that grew up on a ranch and a farm and in a restaurant, and I was in the business world. And so why that's relevant in terms of our long-term success as partners is that, as business partners, is that we both think we actually look at the business differently. So Karen has more of a sociological, psychological look from that perspective and biblical look. I come in from the business side. And the chapter is about her growing up in a car. You'll have to ask her about that. And me growing up in a restaurant, in a ranch, in a meatpacking company, and doing all those things as from a very young age, from the age of probably 5 or 6 years old. So, and we felt that it's an inspiring story because we're very successful business people individually, and we have had an exceptional business partnership, and we've touched thousands of lives over the years of work, and those people have touched way more lives than we have.
And Diane is a reflection of that work from 15, 20 years ago. Because we are very different in our outlook, it's what makes the work we do together like alchemy, just shows up differently.
Karen, can you share a little bit about what Marcia was talking about? How was that like living in a car as a child, and how do you living in a car to being the successful businesswoman that you are?
I started my autobiography with that line 20 years ago. And in this day and age, growing up in a car means something different than it did to me when I was a kid. Because my parents were church people and ministers and evangelists. My mom played the guitar and sang, did all those things all those years ago. We go from place to place to place every 2 weeks. So having the ability to go from place to place to place that frequently up until the time I was in the 9th grade makes it possible for me to walk into any situation and be comfortable. Mm-hmm. And also makes it possible to walk into any situation and know if the room is going to be set up the way that's going to make the conversation be useful. So part of that, my growing up part and my contribution is that we just come into the room and I can be in relationship with people. When you start like that, when you're like 2 months old on the front row of the pew, and you're blonde hair and blue eyes, and people always push, you get used to being around people and not making in my case, not making a whole lot of judgments about that. That actually then moves into whether you're working with a group of 10 people or 200, you can actually be with folks where they're at. That's what comes to my mind. My adult life, when I moved to Portland, this is the longest place I've lived anywhere. I've been in my own house now for 20 years. It just seems strange. However, I travel so much that for the first 10 years of that, I was gone at least a third to a half of the year. So it felt like there was a home base, and my house never got old because I wasn't there enough to get to use it up. I was home for college on some Thanksgiving weekend or something with Mom, and I'm sitting there at the family dinner table with all the aunts and uncles and about 20 of us, and all of a sudden it just dawned on me. I said, Mom, how many places did we live when I was a kid? And, we're eating our dinner and pumpkin pie, and it was quiet for a long time. So we just went on talking about whatever Uncle Carl wanted to talk about. And all of a sudden she says, 78. I said, 78 what? She goes, that's how many places we were until we got to Iowa. So she kept track, and she was doing it in her head. She's 78. And so we went back, and years later, and she was right. Of course, my mom is right about most everything.
Moms usually are right about most everything, I think. So I'm curious. It seems like you two were pioneers for women, especially in your industry. Can you talk about maybe some of the obstacles and challenges you faced and how you overcame them with what you do?
Well, when we first were in work together in the mid 80s, that really was an unusual time for women to be in business by ourselves, starting a business. The Smith of Carnahan Smith and Gunter wasn't really sure that we'd be able to pull this off. But although he did kind of sell the business to us and go off and do his own thing, and was surprised that we did so well. And part of it is we very early on, we got clear about what was the purpose of how come we're doing what we're doing. Because when you get two very strong-willed women together in one entity, it's not like everything's a piece of cake. And there's lots of times when we had to make some commitments on the front end about if we're going to get upset, you got to get unupset within 15 minutes. If you're going to work in this business, whether it's the staff or us, you have to go by the value systems that we wrote down and said, this is what matters to us. We had a staff member once who was just grumpy because we were flying off to some city in the Midwest, and he had grumpy things to say about this city. I said, listen, you don't have to go. This is where the client is. That's where we're going. They're great people. It's a nice place. He says, well, I'm going, no. This is where the client is, and that's where they love. So that's what we're going to go and have fun. So that's one of the rules we have, is that we work with people we love in places we like to go to, and with people with work that we like to do. It's not the mission, but it is kind of underlying focus.
I think primarily the connectivity is our mission of our company, and really helping people bring the spirit of their lives and their intentions into the workplace, so that it's a place full of joy and laughter and creativity and results. It's very important. The results are very important. And then as we grew together, once in a while we get a client that we thought, oh, this was a mistake. And so we began to think about not only our mission, but really working with the people we loved and the places we loved, doing the work we love. And the work that we love is to really help people have the future that they have declared for themselves, and to bring that back into, actuality today. And we picked the business community to do that work in. We had lots of choices, but we decided that we could be most influential inside of business. And I think that it didn't occur to me, I didn't know that we couldn't have the future we wanted. It didn't occur to me because I was never told that as a child. I was told, you do whatever you think you want to do and you'll be successful. I was one of 5 children. I'm the youngest of the children, and I believed it. It didn't occur to me that as a woman that I couldn't have the future I wanted. And it certainly doesn't occur to me that every single solitary person that we work with in their businesses or in leadership development, that they too can have the future that they want. And that's been the driving force for me and Karen.
I think we experienced our first occasion of any kind of barrier or resistance was just about 4 or 5 years ago. There was a change of ownership for change of leadership for one of the clients that we had. And the new guy coming in decided that we didn't know if we had a future long enough for his company, because he figured out how old we were. And he decided that the company would last longer than us. And that was what, maybe 8 or 10 years ago? Yeah. And he's out of the business now, and we're still going forward. And that's the first time I've experienced age discrimination. Mm-hmm. Not when I was 30, it was when I was 65.
It was odd.
And it was an odd experience.
So I have a follow-up. So I don't know if it's really a question, but it's a comment that one of the things that, you chose, Marcia, you said you chose to do your work in a business setting, but so much of what I experienced with both of you and the work was very personal, talking about intentions. I'm a courageous leader and you can count on me. And, all of these things that really helped me from a personal standpoint, in addition to the business side. So
how does that work?
Yes. And I was thinking about that this morning when I was getting ready. I was thinking about that. Our work we say we do leadership development, and most people think of leadership development means I'm going to learn how to manage people better, something to that effect, and it's like a checklist. And I remember going to seminars like that myself before we began doing our work. And actually, our work is more about who I am personally as a person who leads. How am I accountable? How am I responsible? And what do I want for myself and for this business, which I think speaks to what you're talking about, Diane. It's very personal, because it's less about a check off the box about how to be nice to people or how to manage people to get things done that you want done. And it's more about who I am as a person and what gift am I bringing and how am I going to make sure that happens.
It's based in what you believe. So if your beliefs, it's like if I believe that I'm not a competent, capable person, I'm not going to be able to run a business. It's not going to be successful because I can't even see myself being successful. So one of the things we discovered early, because we were working with people doing strategic planning, that they didn't know how to lead the strategic planning. And not only did they not know how to lead it, they didn't know how to lead themselves to actually execute a plan. So we began to realize that our work is really a combination of beliefs and behaviors and characteristics and results. So if I believe I can, I'll be able to. Diane, I think you're a really good example of this. When we first met you, if I'm recalling this correctly, this was a dream of yours. It was an important dream of yours to be able to be a producer, a writer, to be able to deliver a message. And I can't remember if you'd started it already, but I just remember how important it was to you. I've never forgotten that. And the whole time I've known you, and even though sometimes we haven't been together, because it was so important to you. And that to me is what helps drive people who are in business to make really good businesses. Because if you can believe that it's possible for me, and I might need to change the way I think or what I believe to be able to have what I want, then you can have that as a business owner also. And so much of what we run into businesses is we're not, we don't need to teach people but nuts and bolts of business, although we do that. What we need to do is teach them how to be in business as a person who, to be who they are and to bring that fullest into the organization. So it's kind of it's very unusual work that we do, because we're both skilled in business and strategic planning and futuring. We talk about starting revolutions in companies. We think we're revolutionists. We're applied futurists. Oftentimes people talk about us as applied futurists. And all of that was said is that, you got to bring your spirit and your love to work, or you're not going to get what you want.
What I'm noticing, Melissa and Diane, from this conversation and this interview, none of the stuff that we've said now is in the chapter.
That's okay. Yeah. This
No.
is to give people a chance to get to know you a little bit better. It's not necessarily about diving into the chapter. So, and I find your approach to this type of work so fascinating. And my next question was going to be, I'm curious how people respond to you when you're in your first session with them and your process, because, like Diane, I also came from a corporate background and I worked with leadership coaches, and I never had anything like you two are talking about when we did leadership training. And I'm just curious, what sort of reactions and responses and what do you get from these people that you work with regularly?
Well, if you know how you see things, and in walks people like Marcia and I, fiery redhead is usually what she's called, and me, the evangelist who's going to tell people possibilities. And I'm walk into a room, and whatever rules they have about how work is supposed to happen, we don't match it. Here's one example. This is one of our favorite ones I tell, is that we set up to do this thing with this management team. I think there's 12 or 15 of them. And they had the room set up, and our little, the little name tag, here's Karen, here's Marcia, and we put it in the front of the room. Well, every time I turned around, they'd taken my name and put me in the back of the room at another table. And then Marcia and I'd go and we put our names in the front, because we always do our work together. We don't do it one at a time. And it was very difficult for them, because they were ready for a one at a time at the front telling them what to do. And we don't do one at a time in front, and we don't tell people what to do. We just ask 1,000 questions. And one of the questions is, how come you keep putting my name in the back of the room? And they go, well, we don't need the secretary up at the front of the room. We only hired Marcia. Marcia looked at her and said, well, that's my business partner, and she runs the company. but they came with their own frame about how it was supposed to be. And in a corporate world, as you guys have had that kind of experience living inside of it all the time, that's not, we actually engage people in a conversation. Just about the time I met Marcia, I was in business with Don, and I was working with one of my friends who worked at Intel. Everybody knows Intel, giant big place. And I was thinking about, instead of working with Don in this little business, that I would go be inside the company. She talked to me about 15 to 20 minutes. She says, Karen, you would not survive inside the world that I live in. I said, why? She says, because you want action, you want accountability, you want things to get done. Where I work, it moves very slow, and you're female, and that's not going to work. She says, go find another thing to do with your life.
Mm.
I was just kind of like stunned by the response, but I said, okay. I took her at her word, and then I didn't try to go inside a big corporation because there's no reason to cause them angst or me.
So I think if you, that's good, Karen. I was laughing at that because that was so weird for Karen and I to have them keep moving her name to the back. And I finally was like, we just said, okay. So I just had Karen lead from the back and I led from the front. That was really confusing to them. They're like, there are two of those people talking to us. So I think, how do people respond to us when we're doing our leadership development work? And we've, since this virus stuff, we haven't been doing it in person, like in groups of people, but it's really interesting because we talk to them about things like use the word and instead of but. This didn't come from something we read. We've just learned it over the years and some people like love these sessions. They really like it. They feel, they feel like they get to know themselves better. They feel like they understand what it means to be accountable for a result. And others, they don't like us because it's too difficult for them to confront that you are where you are because you put yourself here. Mm-hmm. And if you want something different, you have to choose something different. And then you have to have correlate action and activity to what you choose. I do a lot of work, Karen and I both do a lot of work with executives. And you guys have worked, with executives, and we've worked with lots of executives. And, you'll have an executive who's like, I'm the one. I'm going to change I'm the one, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to change the whole thing. And you're going to do what I tell you to do. And, we just say, you need to get over yourself. And so it starts like that sometimes. It's not well received. If I wasn't made to come, then it could be like the most interesting thing that they've ever done, because it's difficult to come to work and pretend to be somebody you're not, mm-hmm. hoping that people won't find out what you're really like. And when you really get down to it, you're a pretty good person underneath all that and pretty successful. But sometimes we have to dig through all of that to get people to, kind of get a sense of who am I as a person who leads, and what do I stand for? One of the things we talk about a lot is putting your attention on your intention. Mm-hmm. And we have many people over the United States who use intention as a way to keep themselves focused. How do I want to be? How do I want to listen? How do I want to be heard? And what is the result? We've kind of broke it down. And I was just talking to a client yesterday, and he's working he's doing a special project for 2 years in a state that's a long ways from where he lives. And he said, oh, these people are getting so sick of intention. He said, they don't even like to see me when I walk down the hall. And I said, why? And he goes, because I keep asking them, what is your intention? How do you want to be about this? And they're like, huh? And what he's doing is he's teaching them how to think about how they want to, facilitate what they're doing, instead of just going off and doing it without having little thought. And so, people have it's a mixed bag, but we have lots of people who've made life changes as a result of it, and a lot of businesses we've touched. And one of the things we see that we specialize in is multi-generational family businesses. And that's fascinating. And also high growth businesses that start out small and then they expand. And how do they keep to their mission? How do they help keep their the context of their work as a mission-based company and grow to be 350 people, mm-hmm. or 500 people, or 2,000 people, or 5,000 people? Mm-hmm. It's challenging to hold it and mm-hmm. keep it going, integrated into a company. Yeah, we had lots of fun working with Diane's company when she was at the credit union. It was a blast.
We are a team of finishers. I remember that one. I used it the other day with somebody, Diane. I said, you guys have got to adopt a mantra called we finish stuff instead of starting things 14 ways. One more thing about Melissa, that your question had me think about is, there's often when we work with people about their future, who they are, how they want to be in the world to actually have the future that they say they want. Sometimes they don't quite grasp what we're saying, but they will come back to us years later and say, you know what? I
Mhm.
didn't get it then, and I didn't like it when you did it. He says, I now understand what you were telling me 8, 10 years ago. One of our staff members who sent me an email just like maybe 3 weeks ago, because Karen, you know that thing you always did about mission and how important it was to have a mission for the company and make sure that you're following that and you can lead that kind of, he says, I'm in a master's program now. And they asked me this question and I knew exactly how to answer it. At the time when it happened, didn't make sense to me, but I know now what you're telling me. So it's like, sometimes it takes a while for it to go in and be useful. Not like Diane.
Right.
Diane was and still
Early
is
adapter.
a early adopter is one and a great integrator. And there's so many people do not know how to take a notion and concept and integrate it into every place in the business. Diane did.
That was so much fun. That was one of the things I loved the most about my job, was to be able to take the message and put it out to the staff and keep the message alive and keep it going, instead of,
Yeah.
like every 6 months or annually. It's like you need to see it every single day.
So one of the questions we ask all of the authors is my favorite question, usually most people's least favorite question, but we get great answers from it. And that is, we find learning from failure to be a very valuable thing. Sometimes when failures occur in our lives, we actually learn really important lessons from that, and it helps us make, decisions differently in the future. And so I'm hoping that one or both of you could share a time when you experienced a perceived failure, but it actually ended up teaching you something that was highly valuable for you.
Marcia, let me start this one, and it's going to be way off of what you're talking about, Melissa, but it's what comes to my mind. Our business has shifted how we actually deliver work based on how I've hurt my body. So one time I blew out my shoulder and could no longer golf because I reached behind here and did this into the back seat. And then I could no longer raise my arm to write on a flip chart for almost a year. So we had to rearrange everything we did, going handwriting stuff because it was so personal. We could just write down what they said when they said it. And we had to move to doing things off of PowerPoint in those days. And then I could stand, once we had those finished, I could stand in front of a group instead of 25 or 40, I could stand in front of a group of 3 or 400, because the graphic was there and you wouldn't watch me write it on the flip chart. But I couldn't raise my arm, so that was one. So when my body does stuff, we actually learn how to do something different. That's the failure part. And Diane knows this story. When I fell and gave myself a traumatic brain injury, we had to really do some really things differently, because I couldn't work full time for almost 3 years, I think. So Marcia took the whole business, did the whole business, and I worked with maybe 1 or 2 clients that were nice and easy and they weren't hard, because other hard clients were hard to deal with my brain not working. So those are kind of physical failures that actually had us change how we did our work. So it's kind of
You might
answering
say
your
we're
question.
extremely adaptable. I don't think of anything as a failure, because I don't think in terms of failure. I do think that there's been times when we've really had to readjust and reestablish ourselves. Karen having a traumatic brain injury and then subsequently finding out that she had like 12 concussions over her life, and the last one, the 12th one, caused a serious brain injury. That was significant. I would never have called it a failure. In fact, frankly, I think it's a miracle that we're still here, given everything that happened, but we are extremely adaptable to circumstances that we had not planned on. Some people see that as a failure. Other people see it as like building character. I see it like that's how life is, and we have to adapt, because this is what happens to our clients all the time. They're going left and all of a sudden they have to go right. And we've got to be able to help them go right without damaging themselves in the middle of it. So even when clients talk to us about failures, I always think about how much of a failure was it? We'll test it from 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talk about, what did you learn? And then we talk about, what are you going to do with what you've learned? And then we talk about the future. And it's about a 10-minute conversation, because not too much time is spent in, other than to get it complete for people. give them an opportunity to do completion about it. But it's, you know, it's an interesting question, because from my perspective, language creates the future, and the future you articulate is the future you're going to take action for. So I listen to people's failures, concerns, problems, circumstances, and I help them. And I oftentimes talk about, because I'm a committed listener, and I also try to help them bridge to, where does it take you next? And how does that facilitate your future? And that's a real, or in some cases, I'll say, how does that facilitate what you want? And that's a real interesting reversal for most people, because they're going to say, no, I want to tell you about all the bad things that have happened to me. And I say, you have 7.5 minutes, and then we're going to get on with your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some people, it's a relief. Other people are like, I can't talk to you because you won't, sympathize for it. It's not that. I just know that the more you talk about it, the more you embed it. The more you embed it, the harder it is to release. I'd rather have them release it, and that includes myself, than to try to articulate and try to hang on to something because I did something wrong. So we try to make it an and. This happened, and now we're here.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember that?
I'm always after my husband. It's not but, it's and what now, what's going to happen? So, okay.
I do remember, I do remember one example of, and it's not so much of a failure because we don't live in that world, except it said at the end of one of our sessions, and we, and Diane's been in those, like, so we produce an agenda for 4 or 5 days, whatever it is, and it's all timed out. We know exactly what we're doing. However, we're accustomed to, as soon as something happens in the room and we have to shift whatever it is we have scheduled, then we give up the agenda and we just go with what's going on. And then when we ever create a notebook, it has to be in, got to be a way in which people can find whatever information they want as a resource later. And this guy came up at the end, so it's not in order. We always tell them, I said, I know we have 10 chapters in this notebook. We don't do them in order. I want you to know that in advance. Don't be too alarmed. And when we go from one chapter to the next, we'll tell you when we're going back and forth. This guy came up at the end and he was insistent. He was a CEO of a real estate company, I think it was. He says, my staff needs you to do a timed agenda, and it has to be look just like this. And it has to, and you have to keep to the breaks, and it has to be very orderly. And he did it in a way that was kind of like in my face kind of thing. So I find myself backing up. And my immediate response is, that's not how we work. And that's not how people work. However, I paused. I said, I hear what you got to say. So the next day I gave him a timed agenda and I gave it to them. And I said, and it won't work for more than about 15 minutes. But we gave them one because he insisted on having one. How people don't work inside of that kind of framework as easily as he seems to think it did. So
Okay, so I have one final question for you guys. The question is, while you were writing your chapter for the compilation book, was there one thing that you learned about yourself? And if you could share that.
I'm a trained journalist. I was a journalist as part of my career, and I like writing. And one of the things I realized is that I've missed just writing. So what I learned about myself is that I probably really could, write a book with the help of about 10 people, which is the other part I learned. I had Diane reading it. I was slow. I couldn't get the editing done. Every circumstance in the world is happening to me, And Diane's like, hello. She's so sweet. And then Karen's reading it going, I don't think this is right. And I'm like, this is about you. What do you mean you don't know if it's right? And then we're calling her mother to make sure it's right. And her mom's going, yeah, that's right. So what I learned about Karen is that she was rewriting her history in the moment and then had to call her mother to straighten it out. It's like, no, that really did happen. So I think I just learned that it's difficult, challenging, and it's interesting. And as usual, I work with lots of collaborative people to help me with things. Many people were helping me with it.
What comes to my mind is how we wrote this chapter together is how we've done our work for the last 40 years, and how we edited it was similar. And it's very much about a reflection of who we are. It hasn't changed much. For some people that could be boring, but we kind of like it.
When you talk about 40 years, I do think that was the part I learned the most of. That I found that to be astonishing. I mean, I know it, like intellectually, but I thought, it's been 40 years? Really? It doesn't seem like, it seems like it's like a minute.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you both met each other way back in the day when you did, and have continued working together, because I think I know people, and I know for myself personally, I've grown a lot from what you were teaching us, and it's not just teaching, but it's like having us experience. And you do ask a lot of questions, and I think a lot of times we learn by that, as opposed to somebody just telling us the way we need to be. It's like you start asking the right questions, and you start to think about things differently. So I really appreciate I appreciate what you did then, and I appreciate that you guys decided to get together and write the chapter, and that you are a part of the compilation book.
And I told one of our clients last night that he called me, that we were going to do this, and he said, "Tell them I have a parting word." So I'm going to tell you what he said.
Okay.
He said, "I'm 68 years old. I met Marcia and Karen about 10 years ago. I didn't like them. I didn't want to ever deal with them." And he said, somewhere between that and now, he said, "I have changed my life as a result of the work they've done with us and with me." He said, "I am not the same man." He said, "I'm much better." And he said, "Tell them that I found my heart."
Oh,
Oh,
that's wonderful. That's wonderful. It's a testament of really all the hard work that you guys do, and that's a very touching story. Tell him we're happy for him. So
He's a happier guy than he was
Yeah.
a few years ago. I can tell you that.
that's good.
Business guy.
Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Well, again, thank you very much. And thank you for watching the interview. If you'd like to share it, please go ahead and do so. And if you need more information about the book, you can go to FromUsForYou.com and get some details there. So thank you very much. And you all have a nice day. Make it a very hopeful one.